I see the important people have just arrived. We can get started. Well, thank you very much for coming to one of the last events of the Year of China. And we have had an interesting, wonderful, busy year. But we saved the best for last. So I won't say very much about what we have done. But let me just say that we have, this is one of the events organized by Eng-Wong. And when I started this, when the provost and vice president of research asked me to take care of this event, they thought I was a China expert. So I told them I'm really a physics professor. I've been masquerading as a China expert for one whole year. But I was very confident because I knew there were really experts around I can count on. So many people have helped organize the 7 events this year. Eng-Wong is one who has contributed perhaps the most, many aspects of the Year of China events. And he had been away for 4 months doing better things, but we've been telling him to please come back to do the more important part of the Year of China event. Now this particular event is part of a page-by-page, part of the reading, what was it called? Okay. We started reading events, reading books and discuss the book readings. And it started out with the book by Factory Girls by Leslie Chen, went down to many others, including the one books by related to Joseph Needham about scientific tradition. But of course, we're going to end up with the best part. John will say something about this best part, about this particular book. Let me just relate another interesting part of the story. One of the things, being a China expert, at least during this years, I got interviewed. So in particular, I was interviewed by the Xinhua News about the Year of China. We talk and answer all kinds of interesting questions. At the end, they sort of served me a softball question, so I can answer something very light and all that. So they asked, what part of the Chinese culture do you enjoy the most? And since I'm China expert, so I said arts, history, music. At the end, I thought I have to be honest. I said, being Chinese, the part I enjoy the most is the food. I said, you could consider food Chinese culture. Now, I think most of us do consider food as part of Chinese culture. So this turns back to this particular event. And I want to let Jiang do all the talking. And here we go.
I have to have a drink first. Well, thank you, Chung-Yi. It's my great pleasure. I've been preparing for this event for 3 months, so I hope it works out. And let me confess to you that we had only a couple of days to work with the faculty club kitchen on the menu that's going to be served to you. And so this is going to come out, I would say, as a Texas-sized Chinese set of snacks. And when they appear, I think you'll understand what that means. All right, I'm speaking. I'm more wired than I've ever been. I have two microphones on, if you haven't noticed, and it's a little intimidating. In any case, to just follow on Chung-Yi's intuitive insight, that being Chinese, one of the best parts of being Chinese is eating the food. When I retired a few years ago, as you can see, I'm still kind of retired. I decided that I wanted to find a research project that would be interesting and also, I hoped, informative. And the informative part, I tried to find something that came out of my heritage and also related to the sort of the unfolding of the presence of Chinese around the world. You know, as you may know, there's been a huge diaspora of Chinese folks, and when I visited my the sort of the county seat of my hometown, home village, 25 years ago, there's a big banner outside over the street of the town as you're entering, saying "Home to 1 million overseas Chinese." So this is only one town out of many that sent people around the world, to Southeast Asia, to Australia, to North America, to Latin America, to the Caribbean, all over the world. And in every place that they went, they brought their food culture with them. And part of what I wanted to discover in my retirement was sort of what happened when these foods traveled, and the people that took the foods with them, what happened to them. So in part, what we'll talk about today, and what I'll try to show you, is some of the unfolding that's occurred as these particular techniques of food preparation and the ingredients that they use traditionally have moved into new places, and also what happens when the traditional ingredients happen to be absent, and what kinds of adaptations occur. So, and in part, I think the front stage part that food plays for Chinese around the world is related to this notion that comes out of living in a Chinese environment, that eating is sort of a cultural pastime. If you go to other places in the world, I think, of course, you'll experience similar kinds of attitudes towards food. I think one of the things that enamors me to the Italians and to Italian people is the fact that when you go there, you know, abbondanza, you know, the table is full of things to eat, and there's great enjoyment in the food that comes to you. So that's part of the culture as well. So historically, for me, that's sort of how I come to be in front of you at this moment. I think I'm not the only person who has this enthusiasm. I'm glad to share it with so many other people. And one of the things that I think I've discovered in the course of doing food is that there are a lot of fellow travelers on this road. So keeping in mind that this is exam time at Brown, I see a few students around here. I'm going to start off with a kind of epigraph or a quote, okay? And at the end of the demonstration and whatever, I want the audience, I want you to be the test takers and to be ready to engage in conversation. So actually the quote comes from a Frenchman, Brillat Savarin, who originated the quotation, or is credited with it, though other people may have said it as well, that you are what you eat. And part of the identity question that's associated with that brings me to the cookbook that you were meant to read for this assignment, How to Cook and Eat in Chinese. The author's name is Bu-Wei Yang Chao, okay? And in part, there's lots of confusion about sort of how to keep track of people who have Chinese names, because the ways in which Westerners have transliterated, that is, changed Chinese characters into Western alphabets, has transformed itself several times in my lifetime. And what we live with nowadays is what is called the pinyin system. And it's not totally different, but it's very different from the ones that we might have grown up with if you were my age. Now, if you're younger than me, maybe you don't know anything else. But in any case, Bu Wei Yang Chao was married during her 20s to a man whose name was Yuen Ren Chao, the last name Chao. And he happened to be the inventor of one of the contenders, one of the transliteration systems that was around and available for use. He happened to be one of the losers in that particular contest. But it had an impact on the book that you were supposed to read. Okay, how did it have an impact? Well, Bu Wei Yang Chao grew up in China. She grew up in relatively privileged circumstances, and that meant that she grew up in a family where she didn't have to learn how to cook. As a matter of fact, she did get an education, a Western education, which was the vogue, but not necessarily the tradition in her day and age. She was born before the turn of the 20th century, so she came of age early in the 20th. And she was a very good student, a very alert and clever girl. And early in her life, she was assigned to actually to take care of a Western school. And ultimately, because of her talent, became the head of school. And, but I think her family had higher hopes for her, and ended up financing a trip to Japan where she entered medical school. And when she got to Japan, she discovered she didn't like the food. Now, those of you who are fans of Japanese food may find that queer, but it does take some getting used to, I think. And the result for Bu Wei Yang, as she was, or Yang Bu Wei as she was known at that time, was that she taught herself how to cook. And when she sort of learned the fundamentals of feeding herself, I think she found that she was quite good at it. And when she went home to start her practice as a doctor, when she opened her hospital, which her family helped to finance, she also cooked the dinner that sort of opened the ceremonies for that particular occasion. And throughout her life, she then became a hostess, not only on those sort of moments of celebration, but in other sort of more homely circumstances. And there are sort of hundreds of sort of legendary stories of eating at the Chow's table, either as visitors or honored guests. And actually one of them was our colleague on faculty here, Jerry Creeder, who was a student at Harvard and learning Chinese from the daughter of the Chow family, and got invited home. And he remembers very fondly and vividly Yang Bu Wei Chow, as she was known at that point, greeting him in the living room of the Chow home, holding a cigarette and a glass of bourbon. So this was one formidable Chinese lady, I think. The book came about in part because of the sort of this history that I'm recounting to you now. in the course of marriage, Chow Yuen-ren, the linguist, also studied the dialects, the various dialects of China, which are varied and many. And while he was traveling around, his wife went with him. And in each case, with time on her hands, she would go out because she loved people and loved to talk about cooking. She would go out and sort of discover for herself the foodways of the locality. And all of that, not all of that, but part of that is incorporated into this book because of her exposure to foodways around China. Now, when this book was published in 1945, it was sort of a watershed time for China in the U.S. imagination, in part because during the Second World War, China had become an ally of the United States, and therefore occupied a very different position in the American imagination. You may remember that if you studied any American history at all, that in the late 19th century, Chinese were excluded from immigration to the United States. And at the point of exclusion, the numbers actually had been growing quite vigorously, particularly in California, where many people were coming to work in a variety of different laboring positions. But after exclusion, the Chinese population in the United States stagnated and then declined very gradually over the decades of the 1900s. And by 1940, sort of when America was beginning to enter the war, the numbers were somewhere around 140,000 in the United States. That was less than 1% of the total population of the United States. And in that population, the people who sort of had the experience of schooling and exposure to travel throughout China was very, very, very small. So a very thin layer of sort of aristocratic Chinese had begun to enter the U.S. Environment at that point. And some of these came by way of their scholarly professions, including the Chow family. So the Chow family was invited during the war to come, and Mrs. Chow's husband, taught successively at Berkeley, at Yale, and at Harvard. So in 1945, they happened to be living in Cambridge, and that was sort of the era when this cookbook was conceived. So the cookbook itself has the reputation of being sort of the first Chinese cookbook published in the United States, which is not true. There are numerous publications that predated this, and Chinese food, in fact, had enjoyed some vogues during the 1920s. Sort of the chop suey joint and chop suey itself was recognized as sort of maybe an inherited American food. So if anyone has ever read Main Street, the prize-winning novel by Sinclair Lewis, who was honored with a Nobel Prize, chow mein and chop suey are mentioned in Main Street. So 1920s, there was a time when chop suey was already sort of present in the American imagination. But there was a thought, I think, that because the people who had come and who had populated the American towns of mostly the coasts and the large towns of the Middle West, the Chinese who were here in the United States, were not people who were, by and large, of high literacy. These were not people who sort of had access to the high-toned cultural world of the United States. And what happened in the publication of this particular book is that there was an encouragement. First of all, here, actually right in the dedication, it's dedicated to Agnes Hocking. Agnes Hocking, I think the subscript here is, who told me to write this book? Okay. Agnes Hocking was the wife of a philosophy professor at Harvard, and she and her husband actually in the early part of the 20th century had founded a school called the Shady Hill School, still is in existence in Cambridge nowadays, a progressive school, you know, those Harvard professors. And I'm pretty sure that through faculty circles or through the exposure of the Chow children to the Shady Hill School, they came in contact with the Hockings. And the Hockings themselves had a connection to China because her husband had written a report about Christian missions in China. He was commissioned to write a report in the 1930s, which a report that was quite critical of the state and the nature of Chinese missionary, of American missionary activity in China during that time. And the report itself was cause for major changes in the way that missionary activity was conducted. But the China connection was probably from that, and the affiliations that resulted because of that ended up in this dedication in the cookbook. Okay, so I don't know when Agnes said this to Bouvet, but sometime in the 1940s, and in the preface, Bouvet says it took her 3 years to write this book. Okay, so in typical, I think, Chinese fashion, she takes a humble voice and is apologetic in opening her book. So she says, I am ashamed to have written this book. First, because I am a doctor and ought to be practicing instead of cooking. Secondly, because I didn't write this book. The way I didn't was like this. You know, I speak little English, and write less. So I cooked my dishes in Chinese. My daughter, Rulan, put my Chinese into English. And then my husband, finding the English dull, put much of it back into Chinese again. So this is a family enterprise. Okay, so this is a family enterprise, and the book that resulted, I think, got promotional lift from the fact that the book also was endorsed with a preface from Pearl Buck, whom, if you remember, had written The Good Earth and won her own Nobel Prize for Literature in the 1930s. And in the course of, actually in the aftermath of her authorship, sort of became a spokesperson in America for Chinese interests. In addition to that, another author in the preface is a man by the name of Hu Shi, okay, who was a prominent Chinese philosopher, ultimately became the president of Peking University, and then after the retreat of the nationalist government to Taiwan, became the president of the Academia Sinica, which is the premier Chinese research institution in China. But Hu Shi endorsed this book, and Pearl Buck endorsed this book, and her publisher, the John Day Company, the president of that company happened to be the husband of Pearl Buck. All of these circumstances helped to make this into a book that was prominently displayed and well received across America. And it did represent sort of a new class of Chinese in the United States, and the advent of a new perspective on Chinese cooking that was perhaps, more comprehensive in terms of the geography of Chinese food. So the book itself came out 1945, was quickly republished in a second edition in 1948, and then in a third edition picked up by Random House, Vintage Books, which is the book I have in my hand here. So this book, unfortunately, is out of print. We have not done this at this point, but soon. We're going to put the 3 recipes that I'm going to demonstrate for you today onto the Year of China website, so that you'll be able to see the ingredients, and I'm going to try to demonstrate for you some of the things that Wu Yang Chao tried to bring to the American dinner table. And I might say one of the other things that is remarkable about the book is that it really is a book that's written for women, for housewives. And if you remember that time when women did the cooking, in some houses that may still be the case, but what Pearl Buck says is, she wishes that there were a copy of this book available to put on every American housewife's desk, so that they could benefit from all of the wisdom that's in the cookbook, and also I think with a notion that good cooking and the pleasures of the table, especially the Chinese table, because these are Chinese dishes, or at least Chinese in origin. These are things that bring people together, create an environment in which conversation is possible, and differences can be mediated. Though some dinner tables, that doesn't happen. Okay, so as I walk around here,
Speaking of, before you get serious with
Yeah.
cooking, I have to mention this is part of the highlight of the Year of China events, and we have and also, as you said, although you pretend to be the chef, that what's really behind is the whole family of activities. In any case, first of all, we would like to give you a Year of China mug. Thank you for your effort. As I was also alluding to, that although you pretend to be the chef, what's really the best chef at home is Priscilla. Okay, you can go ahead.
all right. Before I start cooking, let me just add a footnote here, because there is a Brown connection, though a very slender one, to this whole story. Yuan Ren Chao was one of the beneficiaries of the Boxer Indemnity Fellowships. Okay? And for those of you who may remember from your history books, In 1899, there was a group of Chinese who styled themselves the Boxers, or at least that was how their name was translated into English. And these were very rude, sort of angry people who tried to rise up against all of the imperial forces, including the Chinese emperor, but particularly anti-foreign in their intentions. And they ransacked much of Beijing, Peking as it was known at that point. And within a few months, imperial forces from outside, by imperial I mean the United Kingdom, the United States, France, Germany, all of the occupiers of the treaty ports at that point got together and they put down the rebellion. And as part of the settlement for that rebellion and for putting it down, they said to the Empire of China, you have to pay. You have to pay for this. So there was reparations. You may remember that after World War I, there were reparations as well that had untoward consequences. But in this case, the consequences were immediate on the Chinese imperial government, but they paid. And the amount that the Americans collected actually turned out to be in excess of the damages that the American interests had suffered in Beijing. So there were some pro-Chinese voices at that point that said this is unfair, I think particularly among the missionary community. And they said, we should pay China back for whatever they don't owe us. Okay? So there was a movement called the reparations movement. And one of the leaders in that movement turned out to be John Hay, who was at that point a former Secretary of State. And he and others prevailed upon President Roosevelt so that in 1909, the excess of funds that had been pledged to repay the Chinese government excess was set aside on the condition that it become a scholarship fund for Chinese to study in the United States. And that was the source of funds that eventually created the scholarship for Yuan Ren Chao to come to the United States, where he started out as a physics student. This is also sort of a Chinese-American story, okay? And he ended up quitting the study of science and ended up studying philosophy and linguistics. So maybe he's an archetype in that way. In any case, he never learned to cook. And with one exception, okay, which I will also go on to explain. And one of the things that I want to point out to you is I'm gonna cook some asparagus here very quickly. I bought my prize Chinese cleaver. Okay. It's blessed by Martin Yan, who is a celebrity cook. So you're getting at least something something of the TV experience. If there were, if there had been food TV earlier in the century and had been available in China, China would have invented, this idea. Okay. So the idea behind this is actually, there are two ideas I think I want to speak about in terms of Chinese cuisine. One is that you cook things when they're fresh. Okay. This is a very basic idea, and I think driven by the ecology of the Chinese economy. I mean, you cook things that were available, and of course, if it wasn't fresh, you didn't have it, period. Okay? End of story. Nowadays, there is much ado in the food communities that you should eat local, you should eat fresh. Okay? So not necessarily bad ideas, but not new in any case. And certainly an idea that is worth repeating. So we've actually chosen this. I think luckily enough, the season has been early, so that asparagus is in season. And if the gods have been friendly to us, the asparagus that eventually shows up on the table here for you to eat will have come from a local farm. Okay, that at least was the order that we placed with the supplier. And the supplier to the faculty club, let me just give them a plug. They use the highest quality suppliers, so it's fresh. Okay, so asparagus itself is not Chinese. Okay, its origins are in the Middle East. Somehow, sort of this sprout migrated, whoever, or way back before history was recorded. This particular plant made its way to China, and is certainly common nowadays in Chinese restaurant menus and in China itself, but not original to China. So this is sort of a footnote for the first question. Are you what you eat? Okay. Does this make you Persian? Question. Okay. So, how you prepare this, okay, is not how you're going to see it. You're going to see lovely spears of asparagus once it comes out to your table. But on a Chinese table, if you had a spear of asparagus, you would have an immediate problem because there is no knife. So how would you eat it? Well, you could eat it, you'd probably pick it up with your fingers. You're welcome to do that when it comes. Or with a fork, you have a knife and you can cut it. Okay, on this table. In the Chinese kitchen and table, the cook's going to cut it. Okay, so here I am. I'm going to cut it. And I'm going to cut it. Okay, so I'm going to start. Okay.
Do you cut it before you cook it or after you cook it?
We're going to see. I think before. Okay. Okay. So, other thing that I wanted to sort of bring to you, this is from the Chinese kitchen, is a rule of thumb. Okay. So, in many cases, when you read in a cookbook, actually you read in this cookbook, okay? When you do a roll cut, which is what we're going to do here, the first cut is 30 degrees. Okay? And then I'm going to roll it and cut again. And then roll it and cut again. Okay? So you cut out. So ultimately you're going to get pieces that have cuts on both sides. Okay? The second cut should be is supposed to be at 120 degrees. Okay? You can see I didn't measure it. Okay? And I'm not sure that I'm going to be able to do this consistently, but in the kitchen when you're there sitting by yourself, you can actually, because asparagus things are small, you can do it. You're going to be able to do it and roll them all at once. So ultimately they should look like something like that. Okay? So as I said, it's not going to show up on your table looking like this, and that's what I was referring to when I was saying that you're going to get Texas-sized.
Why do you cut it at such angles?
Well, in part, it's for the aesthetic of it, but it also gives it a chance to cook in a different way. And We'll just see what happens. Okay. So now this is going to sit in there for a couple of minutes and blanch. And quite commonly, when Chinese cooks deal with something in the kitchen that's vegetable in its origin, what they will do is they'll try to just create enough tenderness in the vegetable so that it comes to the table still fresh with its original flavor preserved. And also with some of the crunch that's intended so that the mouthfeel of the vegetable is also crunchy, so that you know what's happening here. So, I'm going to wait until this boils up, and then we're going to give it maybe a minute. I don't know if anybody has a second hand on their watch, but if you can just keep track of that. The cookbook says 2 minutes, okay? And then after this has, reached the tenderness that we feel is necessary for it to be ready, I can see it turning green here. Okay. Okay. So you can see it has taken on a color that's like jade, okay? We're going to throw it in some ice. Let me say I was hesitant at the beginning to think about cooking without a sink. So ultimately, this is going to come out, and then you just dress it. We're going to treat it like salad, okay? And in the salad dressing, we're going to put it together, marry it with a little soy sauce, okay? And a little sugar, and just a bit of oil. Now, in the cookbook, one of the adaptations that occurs in the course of sort of importing food to another country is that you find things are not available regularly. And certainly in 1945, when the book was written and as it was republished, Chinese ingredients by and large were not present on American grocery shelves across the country. That's different today. Okay, you go into any Stop and Shop or national grocery chain, there are Chinese sections. What they charge is more than you will pay normally in a Chinese grocery store, of which we are lucky enough to have a few in Rhode Island. But so she says, dress it with some vegetable oil, but if you actually read the fine print in the cookbook, you would see that sesame oil would be preferred. So what's available in this kitchen here? Okay, is some. Let me just throw away this ice, and is some sugar, and you would dress it and then let it sit for a bit. Okay, we're not going to be able to do that here, but just a little bit of sugar, a little bit of oil, and then you get your choice of soy sauces. Okay? Now, soy sauce is soy sauce is soy sauce. Okay? What gets delivered with your Chinese takeout? Okay? Actually, not soy sauce. It says soy sauce, but it's not. You can go to the Chinese grocer, or actually to Stop and Shop, and you can find very many different brands of soy sauce. And what's occurred in the American market is that there are dominant players in the grocery business that control what goes onto the grocery shelf. So one of the biggest retailers of soy sauce in the world is a company called Kikkoman, which happens to be, out of, I think, Wisconsin and Japan. And they will sell you a soy sauce. Now, this soy sauce happens to come from Hong Kong, okay? And it happens to be the brand that my mother brought home from Chinatown when I was growing up. It's called Kunchun, and this is available at the Chinese American Mini Mart on Park Avenue in Cranston. And in any Chinatown market, you'll be able to find a Hong Kong brand. And nowadays, you'll be able to find also a Philippine brand, a Thai brand, a mainland brand of soy sauce. And I think if you put them to the taste test, you'll see that each has actually a distinctive flavor that has been just put to the test in each market, so that there's slightly sweeter, slightly more salty, slightly, there are variations in taste. It's like a wine, so that you can take care actually in buying your soy sauce. Kikkoman happens to be the supplier of soy sauce to the faculty club until I brought this. Okay, so now we're going to see what happens. Okay, so the first dish that's going to come out, I think, any moment now, is going to be asparagus spears, and they have been marinated in this combination. And when you go home and you try to cook this, I think, of course, you can cook spears at home and serve them on your regular table along with anything else that you wanted to serve with it, steak or a pork chop or whatever. But on a Chinese table, they're going to be cut up. They could be on yours as well. And they're going to carry the flavor and that distinctive memory, I would say, of China because of the soy sauce. Now, might I say that as you look through the cookbook, if you read through it, you'll actually see that soy sauce, soy products in general, are one of the basic, the fundamental flavoring products to Chinese food. And you might be interested in knowing that soy sauce itself entered the American market during the late 18th and early 19th centuries. James Flint, who had worked for the British East India Company in China, and who had tried to secretly make his way to present a complaint to the Chinese emperor in Beijing. And who was ultimately discovered and deported from China, actually banned from China for the rest of his life. James Flint went home to England and brought with him soybeans. and began seeking a new career as an entrepreneur. Ultimately, he was actually one of the, he supplied soybeans to a friend who ended up going to Charleston, South Carolina, where he began, I think there's enough on the plate for 2 spears a person if you would share. And if there's an empty seat at your table, you get more. So James Flint exported those. Yeah, you can do your own cutting at the table. Thank you. I'm overhearing that. Yeah, you can practice your roll cut. 30 degrees to be followed by a turn of 120. So James Flint was a criminal in Chinese eyes, also stole the soybean, so to speak, and brought it to the West. And then he brought it via a colleague to Charleston, South Carolina. And James Flint himself sold soybeans to Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin brought soybeans to Philadelphia. So who knows what happened after that? I don't. But there's soy sauce for you.
Can we save something for you, or we're gonna eat it all?
No, I eat at home. Okay. Oh. I just found out how this burner works.
John, please announce that that's not our frying pan from home.
Yeah. My wife is worried that you'll think this frying pan is from our home, but it's actually from the local kitchen. Question? We're going to get a mic to you so that we can record your question.
In some cultures, the conversation at the dinner table is frowned upon, and I was asking what is the tradition in China, if you can generalize.
Well, I think it's hard to generalize.
Cantonese are very loud.
Okay, there's one answer for you. I think, of course, it's going to depend on the family and the circumstance. But I think on any social occasion, the expectation is that there's going to be conversation. The reason the food is there is to invite your participation, and then at the very least, and I think in many Chinese tables, the conversation is going to be, this is too sweet, this is too salty. No, this is too whatever. Okay? So I think there will be a lot of opinions about the nature of the food that's being served. But also it's of course a time for you to come together and to talk about a variety of different things. Meals have different settings, and actually if you read How to Cook and Eat in Chinese, I think you'll notice actually that title comes from a family that's steeped in language learning, because it's sort of making, I think, the intimation that cooking and eating are like language. You know, so how to cook and eat in Chinese. So here's the idea behind that, is also sort of the social setting of the food. And one of the, I think, the innovations of this book is that there is a chapter that describes, you know, sort of the etiquette of the seats, of the setting, and also sort of what the expectations are of the dinner table. So, conversation, yes. I don't think there's any control about what it's about. I have no idea what, you know, President Nixon said to Zhou Enlai as they were sitting at the dinner table. But, you know, the idea is to have the dinner and also to promote the feeling that you're sharing, you know, a meal together, a piece of food. Yes?
Well, if this soy sauce, wow. Here, well, if soy sauce is essential to Chinese food, I'm curious, how is it that Chinese, for the liquid, what I would consider liquid salt, versus the rest of the world going for granular, why is that so different? And does it reflect a big difference in, culture?
Oh, actually, salt
As culture.
Salt is very much present in the Chinese diet, and soy sauce is not a substitute for it. It's a flavoring that adds to the foundation of the dish. And even when you cook something plain without any sauce, it's common that soy sauce will end up being a flavoring because you use it as a dip, and you'll create something to flavor the food with that's in addition to. Okay, so I'm actually waiting for a sauce here to cook up. I'm going to spill some. So, in preparation for our second dish, I'm going to try to cook or show to you some spare ribs. And I'm trying to remember here, there are five elements that are common to the Chinese kitchen. Chicken, duck, fish, something, and meat. Okay? Okay. Okay. So, and meat generically is pork. Okay. Not lamb, not beef, but the other white meat, pork. Okay? And one of the things that's happened in the United States, over the last 60 years, is that the nature of the things that we put into our fry pans, ovens, what have you, the meats that we get from the butcher have changed. The nature of what's supplied to us from the farm has changed. So that 50 years ago, 60 years ago, when a pig was butchered and pork appeared in the butcher's counter, there was a higher percentage of fat in the meat, and there was a different flavor because there was more locality in the meat itself. There were no industrial farms in the country at that point. If you bought a piece of if you bought a slab of pork chops, of spare ribs, they were more likely to come from a circumscribed geographical territory. And because of that, the ways in which pigs were fed and all of the culture that is associated with the creation of meat animals, that was different. Now it's more industrialized. What's coming out is a more homogenized product, and there are people who are in the marketplace who are making it possible for you to taste, these more historical flavors. So you can pay your extra buck now, maybe your extra $2 or $3, and you can buy things that have been farmed in a more historical way, maybe in a kinder way in actuality, because the ways in which animals are kept in these industrial locations it certainly has a touch of inhumanity associated with it. Okay, so I'm gonna cook some spare ribs. The spare ribs themselves look like this. Okay, you know what a spare rib looks like. Okay. Now the cookbook itself is going to say to you, okay, take the spare ribs to the butcher and have him cut them into 1-inch pieces. Okay. Now, if you've never been in a Chinese restaurant or a Chinese kitchen or whatever, this particular spare rib happens to be 1 inch down. Okay. But what the cookbook means is that it should be 1 inch across. So a small piece of pork chop, of spare rib. When I was growing up, my mother would chop these by herself. Actually, not chop them. We would get out a hacksaw, okay, and it was up to my brother, who was old enough to handle a hacksaw, to saw them so that they came out in 1-inch pieces. And when you're in your home kitchen, if you have your hacksaw with you, okay, I suppose you could use a jigsaw if you had one at home. Okay. 1 inch, actually, here's another rule of thumb. Actually, if you use your thumb, okay, and you look at the first digit, okay, first digit of your thumb is about 1 inch. Okay. So if you're in your kitchen and you have the upbringing of a Chinese cook, you're going to look to your thumb, you're going to look to your fingers, you're going to look to your arms, you look to your body to actually create the measures of your procedures. Okay? Now, these particular ribs that are appearing before you, these ribs have been first boiled or simmered in a marinade that's full of soy sauce, sugar, and salt, and it says in the cookbook to use sherry. Okay. Now, in 1945, there was no regular supply of. As I see you eating here, feel free to pick it up in your hands, and the real way to eat spare ribs is with your fingers. There was no regular supply of Chinese seasonings in the United States, so she's saying sherry, which is a commonly substituted ingredient for Chinese wine. But now you go to any Chinese store, and in most national grocery stores, you're going to find Chinese cooking wine. And Chinese cooking wine comes from a particular district in China, and comes from a particular town it's associated with called Shaoxing, okay, in present day sort of romanization, Shaoxing. So Shaoxing wine, this is what it looks like. Okay. This is one brand. There are several brands available nowadays, so that each of you can go home and you can equip yourself with this. Or if you don't want to go to the Chinese store, you can go home and hit the sherry bottle. Now, let me say also that if you don't want to sort of take out your hacksaw, this is a method of cooking that's sort of the opposite of braising. Okay, in a normal braise, you're gonna cook these in a fry pan. Okay, you're gonna brown the meat, and then you're gonna put it into a liquid and let it simmer over a long period of time. In contrast, this is a recipe where you're going to take the spare ribs, let them cook for 45 minutes, an hour, sort of absorb the juices, and then after they've absorbed the juices, you take the spare ribs and put them in a fry pan, and you cook them down. This is going to take quite a while, so this process may not end before this demonstration is over. The spare ribs caramelize some of the sugar that's in the marinade, and what comes out, I think, is a relatively succulent and sugary, sort of molasses, dry cooked spare rib. So this method is called dry cooking, and the spare ribs that you have, while they are Texas size, in a Chinese table, they're going to be Chinese sized. And in addition to that, you can buy them already cut up. Okay? So you can buy them already cut up, first of all, by just going to the butcher, as I did the other day. I said to my friendly butcher at Dave's Market, I don't know if you frequent Dave's, but that's one of my favorite places in my neighborhood, and the butcher at Dave's says, how you want them cut? And I said across, 1 inch, and I showed him 1 inch. So he came back 2 inches, but okay. But that's okay. Okay, you can still cook them, and you take them home and you cut them off, the bone, so they're singles. But if you go to the Chinese American mini mart, actually, especially on a weekend, they have begun to carry butchered meats. And I noticed, just as I was there the other day, doing some shopping, they have spare ribs already cut up in approximately 1 inch sizes, and they're already available for you to do that. Okay. Okay. So the purpose of the demonstration, of course, is to show you how this is done, but we're not going to accomplish this in time today. It takes a while for this to boil down, but I think if you have a high power burner at home, this is going to take maybe 5 to 10 minutes to work down. I think it is a rice wine, but I'm not actually sure. Okay? So ingredients. Thank you for pointing me to the label. Glutinous rice, water, wheat, and salt. Okay, so before I lose attention here, I'm heating up the pan. Let's hope that this demonstration works a little better. The next thing that's coming out of the kitchen is egg foo young with oyster mushrooms.
Okay, before you get to the next dish, there's a question from the younger generation.
Hi. Thanks for cooking. We're really enjoying the food. It's really good. I think there's general consensus among the audience. We were curious what your favorite dish was and why.
Well, I have more than one. Okay, but I would say that the dish that's most meaningful for me is fried noodles. Okay, and it's a dish that my mother used to celebrate birthdays, and it's just one that is common to the southern Chinese kitchen. People call it chow mein, but it's not really. In other parts of China, chow mein is not cooked this way exactly. So, and sort of the more national name for it is Lian Min Huang. This means two sides brown. Okay, so it would if you go to a Chinese restaurant and you ask for Cantonese cooked noodles, that would be, I think, my favorite.
Does she do a version in the book?
No, actually, she does not.
Why long noodles, John? What does that mean?
So this is a birthday dish. Long noodles are an indication that you're going to live a long life, which I may or may not do. So what's being served to you now is a dish that is named egg foo young. Foo young actually means hibiscus, foo young. So, and I have no idea why these two particular names are words are associated.
I was hoping you were going to make Xiaolong Bao.
Maybe for my next demonstration. Or okay. So Herb was wishing for something that comes from Shanghai and happens not to be in this cookbook.
That is my favorite.
Okay. So the eggs that are before you are in cookbook fashion, actually. In cookbook fashion, you're going to make an omelet, okay? And the way the omelet is composed, as is with any omelet, okay? You're going to cook the egg portion down. Okay, so that you can see, here's an omelet with some eggs in it. Okay, okay. So running in the middle, okay? So we're gonna keep those eggs, okay? But it's done on the bottom, okay? I'm gonna plate that. Now what happened in the kitchen is that Chef Dave, who deserves our congratulations and appreciation for having taken this on. What Chef Dave has done in the kitchen is that he didn't have, well, he did, but it would have been a lot of work. He could have used omelet pans this sized and cooked many, many times. But what we need to do now is, just to cook the filling in the same pan, we're going to start with some oyster mushrooms. Now, actually, this is not a substitution that's in the cookbook. Okay? Egg foo young as it's cooked. Egg foo young is a Chinese dish, though it is very popular in the sort of the Chinese American menu. And the way egg foo young has morphed in the American setting is that it has become a kind of deep fried phenomenon. So instead of being cooked in a saute pan, the eggs that have come out of the traditional Chinese American restaurant kitchen have made the eggs into a kind of French fry look-alike. So there's a deep fried component to the creation of the omelet. And the ingredients actually are mixed together in much the same way that they've emerged from the kitchen here. Because the technique has just changed. Okay? Here, actually, the French omelet notion is much the same. We're introducing bean sprouts and a little celery and some scallions here. And we're going to, this is actually a term that was invented in this cookbook, stir frying. Okay? So and what it means, actually, in a traditional Chinese kitchen, okay, not only are they going to be stir-fried, as I am doing here, okay, but the wok master actually would be shaking these in the air. He would be tossing, all of these ingredients up and down, okay, which I'm not going to do because I don't want to hit Susan. Okay. So once these things are sautéed, we're going to fold them with the eggs. And what should come out is a kind of omelet. Okay? Now, by the cookbook method, actually, as I was doing the stir frying, I would reserve the vegetables. Okay? The liquid that comes from the vegetables, I would set aside. Okay? And then I would put the vegetables back into the eggs. fold the eggs. Then I would finish the omelet, take the liquid that I reserved from the vegetable cooking, and then I would make a gravy with that. I would slurry that with a little water and cornstarch. Okay. Now let me just say a few things about bean sprouts. Okay. So one thing that came with the Chinese was the common use of bean sprouts, and they were easy to create, to grow. All you need is mung bean seeds, okay, and a damp environment. And if anybody is so inclined, you can go onto a website and find just type into Google, grow your own bean sprouts, okay? And you can do that with a few mung beans, put into a mason jar, you puncture the holes in the top, you moisten the beans, and lo and behold, within a few days, you're going to have your own small bean sprout crop, in your kitchen. Okay. Once they come out, the bean sprouts will have a little tail, and they will show the remnant of the skin of the bean itself. So wheat seed cover, and you put those under the faucet. You wash those away, okay? And in my mother's kitchen, you took away the tail of it, so that this is laborious, painstaking. When you're 8 years old, it takes forever, kind of work. This is what happens. So this is a good thing to do, especially when you have 8-year-olds in your kitchen. Okay. Otherwise, it can take a long time. If you're not inclined to have 8-year-olds, you can cook it. Okay, but it'll taste a little different because actually the tail ends up being it's just an extra that you don't necessarily need in your food. So once you have this, okay, you can add it to the celery that's in the recipe. Now, one of the nice things that I discovered on this is taking longer than I imagined, but one of the nice things that happened when I was searching the net trying to find the ancestors of the chows, or not the descendants of the chows, is that there is a woman by the name of Lenzi Namioka. Lenzi Namioka is one of the daughters of Buwei Chow, and she has become a children's book author. And in the course of her career, she wrote a little story about a fictional story, but much of it from her life, of a family that settled in Hawaii from China and experienced going to an American home for dinner, okay, sort of without experience. So, and it comes to mind because we just cooked a little celery, and one of Lenzi's memories from her girlhood is that not that she was picking the bean sprouts ends off, but that when she was growing up, she took the strings out of the celery. Okay? So that was her experience of the Chinese kitchen and of growing up in it. And when you take the strings out of course, it makes celery that much more palatable. And they show up at this friend's house who had invited them for dinner, and they confront celery sticks, unstringed. Okay. What to do? Okay. So there's a bit of timidity that's surrounding this particular moment in life. and the bold father eventually picks up a celery stick and crunches it down and looks at the rest of the family and he says, "Not bad." Okay. So this goes on to a general appreciation of celery sticks, but that's only one part of that story. And if you go on to the World Wide Web and type in the title of this story, which is called "The Big Slurp," S-L-U-R-P, The Big Slurp. The author is Lindsay Namioka, and you'll get a bit of the heritage of the Chow family, in this particular. And it goes beyond the celery, so I think it's worthwhile. Okay, so that's not the end of the book, but it's all I have to show you. And I'm happy to entertain more questions and to continue the conversation. I'm so pleased that you've been able to join us. There are some cookies that are coming out that I think have emerged from some Chinese kitchen. And there is tea that's being served to you. This is actually a kind of tea that is common in Chinese restaurants in the 1950s. If you can imagine the flavor of lychee nuts, if you've ever had lychee nuts, this is lychee tea. And it has some of the reminiscent flavor that comes from this. And if you happen to eat in Chinese restaurants in the 1950s, this flavor also may bring back some memories of that experience as well. So thank you very much for your attention. And I'll take more than one if that's...
Hi, thanks. This has been wonderful. And you spoke a little about soy sauce, and I was wondering if you knew anything about the history of tofu and its use in Chinese cooking.
So tofu is an ancient product, and I don't know how long ago actually it was produced, but it is sort of one of the chief sources of protein in the Chinese diet. Soybeans themselves have been for centuries, but I don't know exactly how long. You may or may not know that in China there is until the present day there has been no common consumption of dairy products. So of course meat is very rare. The occasional pig that was slaughtered or the occasional chicken that was available. If you were a Chinese peasant family, these were very rare occasions that you had meat on the table. So soybeans were the most prominent source of protein, and they were available not only in that form, in the curdled form, but in many other ways. And actually, one of the nice things in the third edition of this book is that she does not show you how to make bean sprouts, but if you want to make your own soybean curd, okay, bean curd, there's a recipe and a set of methods that are available in the book itself. I haven't tried it myself. I suspect that it's a little more complicated than the cookbook, so we can trade notes about how that occurs. Yes?
The author of the book, whose name I'm ashamed that I can't pronounce, could you say it again?
Bu-Wei Chow.
Wei Chow. Two questions. How did she start from scratch to learn cooking in Japan, Chinese cooking in Japan? I can't picture how she did that. And then the other question is, when I think of Cambridge, Boston, circa 45, I think of Joyce Chen, who is also, she commercialized her wok pan and all that. So do they know each other?
Okay. Actually, let me answer the the first question. Okay, how did she learn? I think sort of by trial and error. And the things that happened for her are not uncommon. I mean, if you talk to Chinese students who are for the first time outside of China, away from the Chinese collegiate dining hall and away from home kitchens for the first time, they have the same quandary. And actually nowadays there are a number of wonderful websites that Chinese students commonly, and who are in the United States, will tune into to get some advice about how to create their own food while they're away from home. And for the first time, this is sort of one of the big changes that's occurred in how food knowledge gets transmitted. One of the things that I would, if I had much greater length to go into, I would talk about this book and actually the transmission of knowledge, because it's a very interesting sort of, and maybe even central piece that's associated with the publication of this book. But that's how she learned, and then she learned, continually over her lifetime. Not only did she make the banquet that celebrated the opening of her hospital, when she got married, she made the wedding feast. Okay, it was a small wedding party, but she cooked the food, and one of the memories that is recounted by Hu Shi, the sort of the quintessential, Chinese scholar of the early 20th century. He was present. He was present at the wedding. He and the husband were both among the Boxer indemnity scholars in the United States. So they had been friends for a long time. He was present at the wedding. He remembers that wedding feast. Okay. Second question? Joyce Chen. Okay. Joyce was a refugee from China. Okay. She actually made a stop in Taiwan before she came to the United States. So when Joyce Chen appeared in Cambridge, she was somewhat later than Bu Wei Chao. Her appearance, I don't know the exact dates of her restaurant, but my guess is that was in probably 1967, 65, something like that. And she built her brand based on that little restaurant, and she used to live up on, I think Garden Street or someplace like that in Cambridge. And ultimately her brother, her sister, and others came to carry on the brand. That restaurant is now gone, but the brand lives on. And I have one of her utensils in my kitchen, so. So, but she like Bu Wei Chao, and like several others, introduced ways of cooking and ways of thinking about Chinese food to the American audience that had not been present up until that time, or had been less visible. They had been present, in matter of fact, so that the people who ran the Cantonese kitchens and the sort of the finer Chinese restaurants in the United States, since the early part of the 20th century, had been serving an all-China kind of menu, though they specialized in Cantonese specialties. And their capabilities certainly included menu items from across China, and a knowledge that was comprehensive in that way. What gave Bu Wei Chao and Joyce Chen and others particular weight in sort of the American media circles was that they represented a new class of Chinese cook, and also a more sophisticated presentation of the ways of cooking that went with Chinese ways. And so it is a remarkable, in 2004, Jason Epstein who is a food writer, but in his first life was an editor at Random House, and actually was the editor that incorporated this into the vintage paperback. The third edition of the cookbook was printed by Vintage Books, and Jason Epstein was the editor at Random House that, brought that particular title into the publication house. He says, this is the first, and best exponent of traditional Chinese food in the United States. Well, he's mistaken in that judgment, but that was what he understood to be the case. I can see that Chung-Yi has a talking stick here.
I'm actually looking at this omelet. I really want to find out how different is this omelet from the one that were served. But hope you guys were not looking. I'm going to try that out. But before I try that out, I would really want to thank Jeff for this wonderful, wonderful experience.